welcome to the Humor Scientist. Now, chances are if you're watching this right now, you're probably at work, or on your way to work, or just sitting there thinking about work. My point is, work and our jobs are a huge part of our lives, and in many cases, we're bringing home more than a paycheck and a few free packets of Splenda that somehow we don't think is stealing, but it really is. But for many people out there, they're also bringing home heart attacks, anger, depression, anxiety, negativity, high blood pressure, sleep disorders, hopelessness, and whatever sickness all those free packets of Splenda are going to cause them. It is safe to say that our jobs have a direct effect on our wellness and mental health. And to all the public health professionals and medical professionals out there, this is nothing new. Stress and the toxic nature of the workplace have been a root cause of a lot of sickness, mental health problems since the first time anyone ever punched a time clock. It's being called the Great Resignation.
Labor and workplace experts are predicting a post-pandemic resignation boom. New data signals the Great Resignation, as some are calling it, is real and may be happening sooner than expected.
As businesses reopen and the economy takes off, employees have options.
This is a moment of employee empowerment, worker empowerment that we haven't seen for a long time.
It's being called the Great Resignation. In April, a record 4 million workers quit, and in May, another 3.6 million.
Mental health are so bad right now. Like, people are prioritizing that a lot more than like their jobs or anything else.
It seemed like everyone I know was changing jobs or stepping off the career ladder.
Now, maybe it's the pandemic and everything we've been through, mixed with a little inspiration for change and justice for all. It is clear that there's been a shift in mindset, and employees are drawing a line in the sand and saying something very powerful to themselves and those who employ them. I want to be happy now. Unlike our grandparents who were the children of the Great Depression, happiness was less of a priority, and survival through a good job, a steady paycheck, and a way to provide for your family and keep them safe was all that mattered. Life was hard, and happiness was rarely a consideration, and certainly not at work. Then our parents put happiness as the ultimate goal, something they would find in retirement as a reward for a lifetime of getting up, sitting in traffic, dealing with the bullshit, and pushing through to go to work every day. And in both cases, for the most part, the only workplace condition they were concerned about was whether or not they got a paycheck each week. However, in 2021, in the grips of everything humanity is facing, happiness now seems like a priority. And in many ways might be the mind and body's best answer to protect both our physical and mental health. As we examine the Great Resignation and employees around the world not returning to or just simply quitting their jobs, we must consider the toxic nature of the workplace on so many levels could very well be a catalyst for this mass exodus. Now, obviously, there are other factors like better opportunities, the ability to work remotely, increased unemployment benefits, and the fear of the ongoing pandemic. Sure, I get it all. And we're going to discuss some of that today with my brilliant guests, Joe Mechlinski and Jeff Lesher from SHIFT. But there is an overwhelming feeling right now that the place we spend so much of our lives and gives us such a sense of self-worth doesn't have to suck anymore. The workplace doesn't have to be exclusive and a constant threat to our emotional, physical, and mental safety. For the first time in history, there is a real worker uprising, and globally, employees are saying not that they don't want to work, but they don't want to work for you. My mental and physical well-being is more important to me and should be to the organization. As we look for the social determinants of health and try to find the root cause of disease and illness, the first place we should look and try to fix is the place we spend so much of our physical and emotional lives. And all this real-life data must be taken seriously. And I think you know what time it is. We need to get a little background, so let's go check out our friend Cersei.
Matt, I'm so glad that you contacted me about this Great Resignation. You know, what is going on? I'm sure you saw that latest Gallup poll where they asked people about their work experiences, whether they were a short order cook or, you know, a magnate on Wall Street. And what they found was that one half of everyone polled was thinking, I'm going to leave my job. And then another half was thinking, I'm really disengaged at work, which is just very fancy survey speak for I'm really feeling checked out with what I'm doing with my life and want to change. And indeed, in March 2021, over 3.6 million people left their employment. What I'm really talking about here is something called the Great Revelation. And that's just not something that the workers are having, but it's more of a larger sort of cultural phenomenon when it comes to the US relationship with work. So I'm going to tell you, Americans before the pandemic and really afterward, just absolutely obsessed with work, and primarily because, we have to be. We as Americans, we work more hours a year with fewer vacation days, as this chart shows, than any other post-industrial nation in the world. And in fact, despite all that talk about us being engaged, American workers today are actually 400% more productive than they were in 1950. And truly the 1950s, that post-World War II era, is often kind of wax nostalgic about how great the US workforce was. But, today's workforce could really just wipe the floor with the workforce from the 1950s. And a lot of that has to do with technology. But all of those gains in productivity haven't really translated in increased standard of living, has it? And we certainly aren't working like only 11 hours a week now. Moreover, you have to think about like the quality of work life compared to other countries. All those other post-industrial countries, they really focus on their workers having vacations. So check this out. The average worker outside of the US in these post-industrial countries has 12 weeks of paid leave. And it's over 20 weeks in parts of Europe. And the US, we get like 10 days. This piece is referring to movement that has gained a great deal of momentum around the world. It was started by a Chinese worker who came up with a manifesto that he posted along with a picture of himself lying down called "Lying Flat is Justice." And having a right to take care of yourself is a human right and not a luxury. And in China, this is a huge rebellion. And in fact, though, when you think about it, it's a rebellion around the world. And the writer of this piece says, sympathizers of this person's vision shared versions of a belief that is gaining a global resonance. Work has become intolerable and rest is resistance. And it's not just low income workers who are, ringing a clarion call about the kind of intolerable work situation. You have a lot of folks who were able to shelter in place and are high income workers who are finding kind of themselves caught in a trap where they're working 24/7. Since they don't have to go to the office, they can get up and right away start working. And if you're a parent, if you have family you have to take care of, this may become quite overwhelming and intolerable. And you're expected to move forward, even though we're in a global pandemic, and it can be quite depressing and overwhelming and terrifying and your uncertain future. And you're not even allowed to really talk about that to any great deal. So not returning to work until conditions are better can be seen as creating a boundary between yourself and the world. And it can be seen as the ultimate act of self-care. Self-care as protest, social justice, and health equity.
My guests today are two of my favorite people on the planet. They are both experts on the workplace and, more importantly, helping companies build a workplace and culture that works for everyone. SHIFT Consulting is a management consulting firm on a mission. They take a crystal clear, data-driven approach to the workplace excellence. By fusing culture, leadership, strategy, they help organizations achieve the remarkable, establishing long-term, profitable, scalable business growth while sending employees home happier, healthier, and more fulfilled. First, he is the managing director at SHIFT. He is guided by his belief in the possibility of even better for organizations, their leaders, and for that matter, each of us. Please welcome to the humor scientist, Mr. Jeff Lesher.
Thank you, Matt. It's almost as though we wrote that introduction for you.
Yeah, I tell you, the Google is a great thing. Google is
very well delivered.
And secondly, we have the CEO at Shift. He is a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, and social entrepreneur who believes that an engaged workforce is the key to unlocking human potential. He has a deep-rooted passion for helping build engaged, mission-driven cultures and challenging business leaders to think strategically about how they attract, develop, and retain the best talent for growth regardless. Please welcome to the humor scientist, Mr. Joe Mechlinski.
Woo! I got to tell you, it feels good.
I
Best
love
hype
having
man in the game, Matt Kazam.
Hey, listen, I do what I can. I do what I can. But I'd like to start with Jeff because, you know, one of our pre-show calls, which I love every single one of them, you shared a quote from your favorite TV show, Ted Lasso, which I haven't watched yet, but on my list. But I think it's a great way to kick off our conversation today. And maybe you could share the quote and why it resonated so much with you.
So I want to give credit where credit is due. It was actually a review of season 2, and that that tyranny is out and empathy is in when it comes to management and leadership, which could be translated in just plain English as guidance that encourages people to consider this: don't be a dick. And it's amazing how much mileage you can get when you boil it down to the essence of, if you really value, or at least depend significantly on the people in your employ, why not treat them accordingly? Why not, in fact, as I was asked a long time ago by a number of nurse managers within a health system that I did some consulting with around performance management and coaching, my people want me to be excited that they showed up to work. And my question back to them was, aren't you? And of course, the answer was, yeah, you're damn right. It's a lot better when they show up. So then show them, give them what they want. If the price of admission is showing them that you care that they're there, show them that you care that they're there. So that was why I was so drawn to that particular line. Tyranny is out, empathy is in.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And Joe, you know, just to kind of play devil's advocate here, but why should companies care?
There's this whole adage that, you know, it takes a bit of an awakening for all of us to think a lot differently. And I think this awakening has happened over the last 17 to 18 months where we haven't, if you're still listening to this, you have not passed away, but you have gotten this sort of sense that life is short and that we're not going to be here long. And I think people are starting to ask questions like, what is the point? What is the point of me doing what I'm doing all day long? And the shackles that we've had around our ankles at these desks, and this idea of, you know, just going to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday for 20 or 30 years and then retire so that you can go do what you want to go do. I think we're kind of done with that narrative. We're done with that belief set. And you can see it now. You know, all the big banks on Wall Street are telling their folks to come back or else. And you're seeing a lot of these organizations deal with a resignation trend that they've not seen yet before. I mean, we're seeing this upwards of 40 to 50% are just deciding to go, you know, vote with their feet. And I think it's a big deal because I don't think up to this point, you've ever been able to convince people to consume less so they can make less. So they've always been a double bind. And now without the idea of having to, you know, live the way that we did before COVID, we're fine with a walk in the woods versus a trip to Disney. And we can sort of start to think about spending the most precious resource we have, which is our time.
You asked Joe, why is this important? It's important because if you're running a business like a restaurant and you don't have people in the kitchen to cook, if you don't have people to bus the tables, if you don't have people to take the order, although most of the restaurants I'm going to, there's no wait staff anymore. You have to scan a QR code and get your interaction and experience through that. But it's very hard to run a business if you have no people, you know, no matter what advances in artificial intelligence and robotics we've made or are making. And the interplay sometimes between somebody like Joe and Joe appropriately in his role as leader of this organization to challenge thinking and sort of transport us to a higher level which is one of the things that attracted me to work within his organization. But then I have to translate that into the most practical counsel I can to our clients to get stuff done in real time. So one of the areas of opportunity is purpose can come through any job. It doesn't have to be that I'm directly feeding the hungry or clothing the naked or housing the homeless. It's that I can, if I work within a restaurant, actually create a warmth for other people to enjoy some human interaction. And if that's meaningful to me, then the role that I have in creating it becomes less relevant and far more attractive. But we have to believe and engage with our people like that, that what we're doing isn't just taking orders and serving food. It's we're creating a moment for people to connect and be better, which is exactly what Joe said. And so it's just finding these ways to make sure that people don't misunderstand that the moment is to walk away from whatever you're doing if it doesn't have the immediate higher purpose that you can recognize, and instead help infuse purpose in whatever it is that we do, because that feels way better when we do it, and we tend to do it way better as a result.
No, that's great. And so basically, to rephrase that, is don't put it all on the organization, but the organization shouldn't work against it for you. You know, you understand that you can take ownership in your own happiness. That's what humor training is all about, from my perspective. But letting them change their mindset to that, I think people look at happiness or all of our emotions kind of like a slot machine. Today, I might pull the slot machine and it'll come out happy, 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 and if it does, today's going to be a happy day. But the workplace and certainly life is not like that. So what do we do when you pull it and the bad things come up? You can find a way to dictate your emotional future if you at least see that as a possibility. And I know Joe probably has some great thoughts on that. And Jeff, please go ahead.
Well, that's right. And I just want to say, and I think Joe would go the same place, at least in this part of the answer, which is that that's where leaders can have huge impact. Extrinsic motivation is about helping people care about things they may not otherwise be thinking. So if I can shift somebody's idea that I'm just like any other restaurant, I'm just stick with that example, and I'm hiring members of my wait staff and I'm going to hire them to take orders and serve food, versus the one person who figures out that we're creating this experience and connection for people. That's my job as a leader, my opportunity as a leader, and then people can choose to live into that or not.
Go ahead, Joe. I know Joe's got something to say.
Well, I would say, I think the big piece for me is that this is really a conversation about agency and sovereignty. I know this is going to sound a little strange and philosophically, sort of at the highest of levels, but I do think what you're saying is it's not all about the organization, right? So this notion that we created these organizations and then they created us, it's a cause-cause relationship. I remember I was watching a documentary about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was about Stonyfield, this guy who ended up selling his company to Dannon, which was a big deal at the time, given that Stonyfield was this organic dairy producer. And they were like, how could you possibly sell out? And he said, well, just for the record, Walmart, is the single greatest seller of organic food and produce in the country. And the fact that they're going to put us in there is a good thing. And they're like, well, again, you're selling out to the big evil monster. And he's like, look, at the end of the day, Walmart and all of these stores will put in their shelves what we are consuming, what we are demanding. And now I'll take that to the different place, which is, if Burger King can't find people to work at $7.25 an hour, great, then no one will go to Burger King. And that's just what we're going to have to face, which is a reconciliation. And I think that's what's happening with people leaving their jobs. There's just a big reset coming, which is, again, who says it has to be done this way? Who says, work has to suck? Who says I have to work for an organization for a certain period of time before I get a promotion or I get a raise? Like, all of these things are assumptions that have been made, and COVID is forcing us to relook at those assumptions, but do it in a pretty high stress, high pressure way, because it's like existential fear of like, am I going to get this thing? And then what's going to happen then? So it's a pretty cool social experiment, as we're living it in real time.
Earlier, you referenced work-life balance, which I think is in due respect, is an old school way of thinking about what we're talking about, which is much more about juggling or blending than it is balance. It's how do I essentially do two things relatively at once, switching in and out of work and non-work related thinking and action. And where can I best do those things from? And that's what employers have a great opportunity to take advantage of, which is creating environments in which their people in the appropriate roles and with the appropriate amount of support can blend the heck out of their roles. If you don't care, and it's not incumbent upon me to do my best work at 11 p.m. from my patio, then let me do my best work at 11 p.m. from my patio, as long as I get it to you at whatever the appointed time was, or in the form or otherwise that will serve your purposes best. So in past economic downturns, there's been what I've referred to in the past as a NASCAR effect. For people who like auto racing, guys driving at high speeds, turning left and left and left and left for 500 miles, which I happen to like. When an accident happens, the yellow flag comes out. Everybody has to slow down, stay on the same lap. What you do during that period is go into the pits and take more time to make your race car even faster for longer when you return to racing at full speed under green. This post-pandemic opportunity is just like the recessions that preceded it, out of which companies like Walmart, you may have heard of them, and Google, you may have heard of them, in successive recessions came out. So who are the Googles and Walmarts of the future? They're going to be the ones that can figure out how to crack the code of, I don't care where and when you do your work. I just care that you do the very best work that's possible, and I'm going to help enable that.
Said. And Joe, anything?
No, I think he nailed it. And
Right.
I think, yeah, then I think the only thing I would say, to this is, everyone has this moment right now, I think, to, again, really rethink the way that we want to live. The work, we're filling in the conversation about work, but this is really about the way that we live. It's the way that we associate. It's the way, it is, given that the conversation, I know you're going to have next in some ways, about health, like this back to like, how do I want to think about my own health? This is people are rattled with the vaccines and the mandates and the rules and the masks. And at the end of the day, this is still one big fat giant mirror staring us in the face to say, hey, what do you think? You being the operative word of like, you're the actor in the movie. And I think that's the conversation that we're trying to have with as many people as we can, as many organizations, because we believe, we've all been withholding. I heard recently, like, the opposite of depression is expression. And so the idea that people can fully express, just like I am here with my pup in the back and I'm sitting here in shorts today without shoes on, gives me more of an ability to express so I won't be depressed. And I think there's something about that, about in the workforce, that we had to put on these masks and these uniforms and we all had to look the same. And it was like, we'd all used to joke, like, I gotta make the happy hour so I can get happy again. We should take a look at all this because it's ass backwards.
And I'm all for that. However, what's it looking like at the corporate level? Are they embracing this at all, or are they, still fighting it, along the way? And I know that you're out there working with some of the best companies, the most admired companies, people who get it, so, but what are you seeing, kind of on a broad scale, and then with your people that you're working with?
I think most people are going to expect this type of response, which is there are some real earnest, humble, engaged, thoughtful, caring, compassionate, empathetic, Ted Lasso-like leaders that are trying to figure things out. They recognize this is uncharted. They recognize no one really knows what's next. And they recognize whatever is next, we have an opportunity to make it better by being collaborative and in involving people, having their voices heard, having their votes counted, having people feel like whatever is next, right? So think about, we went to Thanksgiving dinner, you wouldn't kick people off the table. You wouldn't say, well, you were late, you're not allowed to have dinner with us. Like, this idea of how we treat each other, I think at the highest level is sort of one grouping. I think, there's the other grouping of followers. Those are companies that watch the big tech companies or the most, engaged or the best places to work. And those companies are window dressing at best. They're followers. They're not really doing this with the earnest attempt at really looking at transforming the way we do everything. I think it's only for those organizations to look in the mirror and ask themselves, like, is this really, am I doing this for the right reasons, or am I doing this to fit in? Am I doing this to be part of the club? And I think, sometimes that's okay. If you need a little motivation, a little nudge off the cliff, if you will, to just jump in. My son, over the week here, we were in the Dominican, and all the kids had jumped off this cliff. And, I know for a fact the reason he jumped off was not because he wanted to do it, and not because I offered him $10,000 worth of V-Bucks, which is this thing through Fortnite. It was because he didn't want to be the one left out. And that's okay sometimes, right? And I think that's, but it's also an opportunity for him to maybe rethink his, why his dad's making him jump off a cliff. It could be a bunch of things. So before I digress, there's a third group, and these are, they got their heads in the sand. They don't understand the 5 stages of grief. They're in denial. They think that this is going to pass. They think they're going to go back. And by the way, not only are they going to go back to normal, but it's this psychology that this guy, Dan Ariely, talks a lot about. So this guy has written a bunch of books. His most notable is called Predictably Irrational. And he's basically studied that people don't want to be last. They would prefer to make it worse for themselves so that they're not last. It's why when you look at who's voting against minimum wage, it's weird that a lot of people who are like down at that class of labor and that class of pay, they're like, no, I don't want to be last. And then I think that psychology is big here. It's like, I was pained, I went through trauma, I want people to go through it too. So you've got a lot of hurt people hurting people. And they need some good therapy. So there you go.
As both of you are incredibly funny people, you've took my stand-up challenge, you've done stand-up comedy. I've been at these events where laughter, it's throughout the whole thing. I mean, I also tell people that we have to bring humor back to the workplace. We have to give them permission to laugh again. And you certainly have given them permission at Shift.
Just saw Chappelle live for the first time this past week. He was in DC. It was quite the experience, but I loved his ending. And I will not give the precise joke or the way that he did it. But to me, his whole piece about kindness and about making fun of each other and about bringing us all together as humans, it reminds me of the way that you do it, Matt, which is there's this level of humility and humanity. And this not taking ourselves too seriously. And so I think, just to start off, not answering your question, it's just kind of what came to me, which is, I think if nothing else, COVID has been a shared experience. That should give us a shared understanding that we all are unique and we're all in this together. That's the nexus, right? So the nexus is, I am an individual, but I'm also part of a community, and that community is hurling through a rock or hurling through the universe on a rock going 66,000 miles an hour. And that's about it, right? And so we've got Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, who've now seen that pale blue dot, and hopefully will change their perspective on how fragile life really is. So for us at Shift, it always starts with modeling the way. It's the quote from Gandhi, be the change you want to seek in the world. It's to do the work first. And it's to take that part incredibly seriously for 2 reasons. One, because no one wants to be told what to do. The idea that habits are caught and not taught really does become sort of a fabric of who we are. And it's also parenting, right? My kids will learn much more from the way that I am, as an example, than the way that I speak. And so I think that's one piece for you. But yeah, around humor, we probably don't use it enough. It's why Jeff and I came through your program and really had an amazing experience of, what is it like to get up on stage and to attempt to share stories and a bit of yourself in a way that is as, exposing as it gets, because there's only one goal, and it's to make everyone involuntarily laugh at you and your stories, your point of view and your worldview, and all these different things that are just really difficult to do. So from a leadership point of view, I would just say that what I learned out of that was, we've always thought about humility as a commonplace, but it's definitely something that I've doubled down on, thanks to you. So,
well, thank you. Now, Jeff just wants to be a comedy star. He wants to open up for Chappelle. I know that. It's I know there's some of that in him, but Jeff's Jewish. The comedy was built on the backs of our people, so it's in him.
Yeah, I come with the requisite amount of guilt and self-loathing. And one of the things that you actually encouraged us is that you can sort of direct humor in one of two ways. You can direct it outwardly, sort of pick on others in a manner of speaking, or you can poke fun at yourself. And I really take that to heart. I mean, to Joe's point, as far as kind of discovering it, finding it within yourself, we do make, I think we make each other laugh anyway. And we sometimes make our clients laugh until we send them the bill. By being not self-effacing, but self-deprecating, having a sense of humor about ourselves and what's possible. But it's kind of interesting because the extrapolation to the serious point that I would make here is that sometimes an interesting compliment that we're paid by somebody at a client organization we're working with is their desire to come work with us because of who we are and how we are. But the better counsel is don't take our version of this, create your own where you are, and we can help you do that. And I do think that and this gets said a lot and it has to translate into reality, but it's like we take our work really seriously, you take your work really seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And that's important. The thing that I take the most seriously from the pandemic is the idea that washing one's hands only became in vogue because of COVID-19, a worldwide pandemic. And as I noted when we did our stand-up, and I won't use any expletives here, it's been a really good idea, especially if you're going to insist on shaking my hand. For goodness sake, wash your hands.
Right. Thank you so much for being with us today. Tell folks, first of all, shiftthework.com. Go there, be part of the Shift Society. It's an amazing group of people that have changed my life and my perspective and empowered me to want to do more. They're both churning out tons of content. Joe has 2 books. Jeff has got a podcast. He's writing a blog. He's on LinkedIn every single day, just spitting, just dropping bombs and spitting knowledge. So tell the folks how they could, be part of your world a little bit more.
Well, I think you hit on a couple. So shiftthework.com is the main website, and you can find a lot of stuff through there. You mentioned the podcast, so I will plug that. It's called Inevitable: The Future of Work. And the website for that is inevitablefutureofwork.com. And we have on a variety of great guests. We occasionally have internal conversations. Joe has graced us with his presence. And we talk about stuff. And I think to the point of humor, hopefully when you listen, you get informed, you get activated, which is our primary point, but you also get a little bit of levity or at least humanity that encourages you to believe in what you're doing and to do it a little bit more, a little bit better.
I would highly encourage people to check out the podcast. Jeff is underselling it massively right now. It is, we've received over 100,000 downloads in the last couple of years. And for a business podcast, that's a pretty big deal. The conversations are really, I think, raw. Is the way I would describe the way that Jeff does this, which is sort of peeling back the veil of the comments or the conversation that we had today about, like, let's get down to the root cause, right? That's the way you started today, which was, health is about getting down to the root cause. Well, we sort of agree, and we agree that, the best way to start this is through conversation. So thank you.
Oh, thank you both. And I will see you very soon, hopefully live and in person. Thanks so much to my brilliant guests today, Joe Mechlinski and Jeff Lesher from Shift, for sharing their genius, perspective, and knowledge. And I want to continue that conversation here in the Humor Lab and really look at why and how humor can help with culture and if nothing else, change the mindset that humor is not a threat at the workplace. If you walk through your halls at your brick and mortar office, if you're back already, or you jump on a Zoom call and you hear laughter, it is not a threat. It's actually a good thing. It means your employees are bonding. It means that they feel safe. It means they feel connected. It means they feel valued. They feel all the things that you're looking for culture to do. Humor exists because humor and laughter truly are culture builders. And I want to share this quote from cultural anthropologist Mahadev Apt, because it speaks to it so well, is that when people are laughing, it means that they're comfortable with one another. I mean, barring, the nervous laughter and the small, but in its purest, most beautiful form, this is what humor and laughter do. They make people comfortable with one another. They feel open and free to share those ideas, to speak up. Remember, you want to include everyone because the next great idea could be the person that's sitting there not feeling safe, not feeling open to provide it, So you want contribution and connection from everyone there. And the other great news is there's no diminishing return with this. It's not like too much laughter is a bad thing. It's not like anyone ever went to bed, as I mentioned before, thinking, you know what, I laughed too much today. Tomorrow I'm going to try not to laugh too much. The more laughter, the more bonding occurs, the deeper the connection. And as I mentioned, humor and laughter are culture builders naturally. They make people feel emotionally safe. And if you don't understand that some percentage of your workforce is showing up to work every day and not feeling emotionally safe, you're missing the point almost entirely. And what that limits that employee so much, it limits that human so much, it actually works counter to everything that you're trying to accomplish from a wellness, mental health, and innovation, productivity standpoint. We want to make them feel safe. Humor does that. It gains your audience's trust. Gives them a sense of connection. They feel valued. They feel like they're part of something when humor is done with strategy and intention and unlocking the beautiful part of the human experience. It'll make folks feel valued, makes them feel present and in the moment. It also makes them be seen as more authentic and genuine. Humor does all of that because humor, as I mentioned, is based in empathy. And this whole episode, we're talking about how do we look at the human asset, the human employee in a more human way, starting to use humor and storytelling and truth and it all wrapped up in this culture catalyst, if you will. The reason it works so well is because we need to be more empathetic. As Jeff Lesher shared with us, the quote, tyranny is out, empathy is in. Companies, I see them now doubling down on fear. That's not going to get it done. Human beings have been through a tremendous trauma and are continuing to go through a trauma. Empathy is really your only way out, and understanding what we have all been through will go a long way. Not just from retaining your people, but also hopefully attracting people who want to work in this type of organization going forward. This data is incredibly powerful, specifically about how it benefits the workplace. Psychology Today. Workplace humor has some unexpected benefits. How workplace humor can be used to your advantage. Accounteps polled 2,200 CFOs. They found a majority appreciate comedic chops in the workplace. Humor can lighten things up and it can help build culture. Them saying it. 78% of execs think a sense of humor is important for employees. They just don't know how, but they certainly understand the why. If you can learn the humor of the people and really control it, you also know that you're in control of nearly everything else. Control is a good thing. Being able to dictate our emotional futures are a good thing. Humor is serious business. You're not as funny as you should be, and your company is suffering because of it. The business world is taking a serious look at the role fun, play, and humor contribute to an optimal work environment and to increase productivity. They're laughing, they're more productive, they're more innovative. It's just the facts. Properly used humor serves many good purposes, builds relationships among employees or with bosses, helps workers maximize their innovative thinking, diffuses tension and stress, increases productivity, and just makes people happier. What is wrong with that? Humor may seem like a strange thing to look for when hiring, but I found it is an excellent indicator in a person's intelligence, confidence, overall temperament. Over the years, it has been people who can laugh and learn who have succeeded. Very important, because we not only want to empower your existing workforce with some humor training, with some at least permission to be funny again, to use this powerful culture builder, but also you want to attract new people. So in your hiring practices, hire that person that's funny. You intuitively, it's telling you to pick that person, but all things being equal, if they're just as skilled as someone else, because eventually that's how you bring it back in. Everyone's hoping that eventually they hire someone who will eventually be funny and bring humor into it. But if you make it strategic in your hiring practices, before you know it, you've got a good influx of new, fresh blood and you've created a culture that they're going to thrive in, so they're not going to leave. I do a program called the Entrepreneur CEO Stand-Up Challenge, where I take CEOs, big-time companies, teach them stand-up comedy and humor with the idea that they're going to bring it back to the workplace. But then they actually have to perform stand-up comedy at the end. And not only over the 2.5 years of the program, they already see that they were retaining employees longer, but they were also attracting new talent, because everybody wants to work for the boss who did stand-up comedy. Everybody wants to work at a place where humor and laughter are celebrated and not villainized. And the last one from the World Economic Forum: we should take humor in the workplace more seriously. Humor is one of our most important forms of emotional expression and is fundamental to a healthy workplace. Presidents, a sense of humor is part of the art of leadership, of getting along with people and getting things done. You get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, my mother used to say. So how do you do it? First, make room for humor. If they're laughing 15 minutes a day, I guarantee that means the other 7 hours and 45 minutes are going to be incredibly more productive. And humor is not something, it's like exercise, give them time and almost not just permission, but access. Let them go watch, some funny videos online, or, in your communication, start trying to be funnier, get some training. There are a lot of providers like me. I have humor joke writing workshops and improv workshops, and all these things are not only giving them powerful communication, connection, and coping skills, but they're getting real training, but having a good time while they do it. At your meetings now, make room for fun. Wear some silly hats, show some silly videos. It isn't that if you do one, then the meeting is going to be less productive because you made some room for fun. The meeting is going to be incredibly more productive. So, really, at the end of the day, just be human. Humor will find a way. And with that, let's look at our last big takeaway. Thanks so much for watching today. It really does mean a lot to me. I wouldn't be doing all this if I didn't think the science of humor could make a difference in the world, and certainly a difference in the workplace. And up until not so long ago, humor and laughter had an important place and part to play. Employees were allowed the freedom to take ownership of their funny, which aided them actually showing up as their most authentic, genuine, and vulnerable selves. And in a real way, and not just something that is shouted from the stage at team-building meetings across the world. Today, humor's place in the workplace is almost non-existent. Sure, you hear laughter here and there, and in some companies, they've actually snuck it into actually being part of the culture. And not just as a stress reliever or a way to make your boss just seem a little less boring, but also to fuel creativity, innovation, create a sense of belonging, and set the stage for deeper and more meaningful conversations, transforming the entire company into a safe space that I tell you is just the polar opposite of toxic. Now, probably not a coincidence that these are also the same companies that consistently top the list of best places to work and most admired companies. Now, what I believe these utopian organizations of commerce have found, either strategically or organically, is that humor makes us our most human. And my hypothesis, and to be clear, obviously organizations need other things besides humor to create a thriving culture. Otherwise, you'd be laughing your way all the way into lawsuits and bankruptcy. I get it. But with regards to humor, it is not just what laughter and humor do for an organization. It is what it says to the beautiful humans in your employ. It says we care. We care about your physical and mental well-being. We see you as human and want you to have the full access to the toolbox of humanity, where humor, happiness, laughter are the emotions that give us hope, connection, perspective, control, and safety. Where would you rather work? Thanks again for joining us. Hope to see you next time. And remember, even in the workplace, when the going gets tough, the tough get laughing. Be well, my friends.